A dog gives her puppy a final hug before being put down. And then the vet suddenly screams, "Everybody stop!" What should have been a quiet, heartbreaking moment turns into pure chaos, because this dog isn't what she seems. Marked as dangerous, pushed toward death, and dismissed as worthless. Yet in one split second, she reveals a hidden ability that could change everything. But why was she really brought here? Who wanted her silenced, and what terrifying secret was someone willing to bury forever? As the fight for her life spirals into fire, betrayal, and shocking discoveries, one thing becomes clear: saving this dog means exposing a truth powerful enough to bring everything crashing down. Will she and the one person brave enough to stand by her survive long enough to reveal what's been hidden, or be destroyed before the truth can come out? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The rain hammered against the shelter's metal roof like angry fists, creating an ominous drumbeat that matched Hollis Pierce's pounding heart. Her hands trembled slightly as she pushed the gurney down the dimly lit corridor, its wheels squeaking against the worn linoleum floor. On the cold metal surface lay Lace, a beautiful brindled Belgian Malinois, her coat a tapestry of dark and light stripes that seemed to ripple with each breath. Pressed tightly against Lace's chest was a small, shivering puppy. The little one had refused to leave Lace's side since they were brought in, and now, facing what was supposed to be their final moments, they remained inseparable. Hollis swallowed hard, fighting back tears as she watched Lace's protective embrace around the trembling pup Titan, as if the older dog somehow knew what awaited them at the end of this hallway. The examination room door loomed ahead, its frosted glass window casting a harsh fluorescent glow into the corridor. Through the glass, Hollis could make out Dr. Voss's silhouette moving about, preparing for what the paperwork euphemistically called final processing. The very thought made Hollis's stomach churn. "Almost there," she whispered, more to herself than to her charges. The words caught in her throat as she pushed through the door. Dr. Eleanora Voss stood at the metal prep table, her back straight and professional as always. Her dark hair, streaked with premature grey, was pulled back in a severe bun, and her rimless glasses caught the overhead light as she turned to acknowledge Hollis's entrance. In her latex-gloved hands, she held a syringe that seemed to Hollis unreasonably large. "Bring them over here, please," Dr. Voss instructed, her voice carrying that carefully neutral tone that Hollis had come to recognize as her way of maintaining emotional distance. The room smelled sharp and clinical, antiseptic overlaid with something else, something chemical that made Hollis's nose twitch. Near the counter, someone had been cleaning equipment with industrial solvent, the fumes still hanging heavy in the air despite the ventilation system's constant hum. Hollis wheeled the gurney into position, her movements slow and reluctant. "Dr. Voss," she began, not quite sure what she planned to say, but knowing she had to try something, anything to delay the inevitable. "We've been through this, Hollis." Dr. Voss cut her off gently but firmly. "The paperwork is in order. These are marked for euthanasia, and we have to follow protocol." Thunder crashed outside, making the fluorescent lights flicker. In that moment, Lace's head snapped up, her nose working the air in sharp, alert movements. The dog's entire demeanor changed in an instant. Gone was the resigned sadness, replaced by an intense focus that Hollis had never seen before. The chemical smell in the room seemed to intensify, and Hollis noticed a strange shimmer in the air near the supply cabinet. Lace's reaction became more pronounced. She rose to a crouch on the gurney, still keeping the puppy close with one protective paw, while her entire body tensed like a coiled spring. Dr. Voss had just taken a step forward when Lace let out a sharp, distinctive bark, not one of fear or aggression, but something else entirely. It was a sound that seemed to carry purpose and urgency. The doctor froze, her experienced eyes catching the same shimmer that had drawn Lace's attention. In that fraction of a second, understanding dawned on her face, followed immediately by alarm. "Nobody move!" Dr. Voss's command cracked through the air like a whip. "The solvent! It's pooled and vaporizing. One spark and—" As if the universe had been waiting for those words, a tiny static discharge from the metal cabinet created a small spark. Time seemed to slow as Hollis watched the spark dance through the air, heading straight for the shimmer of vaporized solvent. In that same moment, several things happened at once. Lace lunged forward, positioning herself between the humans and the danger zone. Dr. Voss dropped the syringe and lunged for the emergency ventilation override switch. Hollis, acting on pure instinct, grabbed the puppy and backed toward the door. The spark fizzled out mere inches from the solvent vapor, thanks to the sudden rush of air from the emergency vents that Dr. Voss had activated. The whoosh of the industrial-strength ventilation system cleared the dangerous fumes in seconds, but everyone in the room remained frozen in place, hearts pounding with the realization of how close they'd come to disaster. "That dog," Dr. Voss said slowly, her professional composure cracking as she stared at Lace with new eyes. She knew. She detected the danger before any of our equipment did, before any of us could smell it. Lace had relaxed slightly but remained alert, her posture that of a trained professional rather than a condemned shelter dog. The scar on her ear where her tattoo had been partially removed seemed more prominent now, as if demanding attention to its significance. "She's not just any dog, is she?" Dr. Voss directed the question to Hollis, but her eyes remained fixed on Lace. Hollis shook her head, her voice stronger now with conviction. "No, she's not. And I don't believe for a second that she was properly surrendered for euthanasia. Something's wrong with those papers, Dr. Voss. This dog has training, specialized training. She just proved it by saving all our lives." The puppy whimpered softly, and Lace immediately turned her attention back to the little one, demonstrating an impressive ability to shift from alert protector to gentle caregiver in an instant. Dr. Voss watched this interaction with growing interest, her analytical mind clearly processing everything she'd just witnessed. "The protocols can wait," Dr. Voss announced, removing her gloves and dropping them into the medical waste bin. "I want a complete evaluation of both dogs, and I want to know exactly where they came from. No one is being euthanized today." She paused, looking directly at Hollis. "Sometimes being overlooked means you see things others miss. You were right to question this, Hollis." Relief flooded through Hollis's body, making her knees weak. She stepped closer to the gurney, reaching out to stroke Lace's brindled coat. The dog leaned into her touch, and Hollis could feel the strong, steady heartbeat beneath her hand, a heart that would continue beating, thanks to a near disaster that had revealed the truth. The storm outside began to ease, its fury spending itself against the shelter's walls. Inside, the atmosphere had transformed from one of doom to one of purpose. Dr. Voss was already on the phone, calling in their senior veterinary technician for additional support. Hollis remained with Lace and the puppy, watching as they settled back down together on the gurney, the older dog's protective instincts never wavering. "You're safe now," Hollis whispered to them both, and for the first time since she'd started working at the shelter, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The overlooked junior tech had seen what others had missed, and because of that, lives had been saved in more ways than one. Through the window, the first rays of sunlight began to pierce the storm clouds, casting long fingers of light into the examination room. They fell across Lace's brindled coat, highlighting the precise, professional way she held herself, the bearing of a trained service dog who had never forgotten her calling, even in the face of whatever circumstances had brought her to this place. Dr. Voss returned to the room, her phone call completed. She moved with new energy, the strict adherence to protocol replaced by determined curiosity. "The paperwork listed her as a stray," she said, picking up Lace's intake forms. "But everything about her behavior suggests extensive training. The way she detected those fumes, her protective instincts, her disciplined responses. This is a professional working dog." "The scar on her ear," Hollis pointed out. "It looks like someone tried to remove an identification mark." Dr. Voss leaned in to examine the scar tissue more closely. "You're right. This was deliberate. Someone wanted to hide this dog's identity." She straightened up, her expression hardening. "Which means we're not just dealing with incorrect paperwork. This could be theft of a service animal." The implications of that statement hung heavy in the air. Lace, seeming to sense the importance of the moment, sat up straighter on the gurney, her bearing almost military in its precision. The puppy, still tucked safely against her, watched everything with bright, curious eyes. "We need to document everything," Dr. Voss declared, reaching for her camera. "Every marking, every behavior, every skill we've witnessed. Hollis, I want you to write up everything you've observed about both dogs since they arrived. Someone out there is probably looking for Lace, and we're going to help them find her." As if understanding she had allies now, Lace relaxed slightly, though her protective stance over the puppy never wavered. The bond between the two dogs was something special, Hollis realized. Not just the simple affection between sheltermates, but something deeper. Like everything else about this situation, it warranted closer investigation. The near disaster with the solvent had become a turning point, transforming what should have been a tragic ending into a beginning. Questions remained. Who had tried to hide Lace's identity? Why she had been marked for euthanasia? And what connection she had to the puppy she guarded so carefully? But now they had time to find the answers. Outside, the storm had passed completely, leaving behind that peculiar stillness that follows natural tumult. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted just as dramatically, from resignation to purpose, from ending to beginning. Hollis watched as Dr. Voss began her examination of Lace, noting every detail with scientific precision, while the dog cooperated with the calm confidence of one used to working with professionals. The gurney that had been meant to carry them to their final moments now served as an examination table where their true story was beginning to unfold. Hollis stood ready to assist, her earlier fears replaced by determination. They had all survived today's close call, and in doing so had uncovered something much bigger than themselves. Chaos erupted in the aftermath of the near disaster. Staff members rushed around the examination room, throwing open windows despite the rain to clear out the dangerous fumes. The acrid smell of industrial solvent still hung heavy in the air, making everyone's eyes water. Hollis Pierce stood rooted to the spot, her mind racing as she watched Lace, the supposedly dangerous dog, still calmly protecting the puppy on the gurney. The Belgian Malinois' reaction to the solvent fumes had been nothing short of remarkable, more like a trained professional than a violent stray. "Everyone out!" Dr. Voss's voice cut through the commotion. "Let's get some air circulation in here before someone gets hurt." Staff members filed out into the hallway, but Hollis lingered, her eyes fixed on Lace. The dog's behavior didn't match anything in her paperwork. Not even close. "Pierce!" Director Lenore Stapleton's sharp voice made Hollis jump. The shelter director stood in the doorway, her tailored blazer somehow still pristine despite the chaos. "Why aren't you moving that animal back to containment?" "Director Stapleton," Hollis began, her voice stronger than she felt. "I think there's something wrong with Lace's paperwork. A dangerous dog wouldn't have." "Enough!" Stapleton cut her off with a dismissive wave. "That animal has already been designated for euthanasia. One lucky accident doesn't change the fact that she's dangerous. But she just saved everyone in this room!" Hollis protested, gesturing to the gurney where Lace lay quietly. "She detected those fumes before any of our equipment did. That's not something an untrained dog would do." Stapleton's eyes narrowed. "Miss Pierce, need I remind you of your position here? You're a junior technician, not a behavioral specialist. The paperwork is quite clear about this dog's history of aggression." "The paperwork could be wrong," Hollis insisted, even as her stomach knotted with anxiety. Standing up to Stapleton wasn't something anyone did lightly. Maybe there was a mix-up, or... "There was no mix-up!" Stapleton snapped. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor as she approached Hollis. "That dog has been properly evaluated and documented. The euthanasia order stands. Now, return her to her kennel until we can reschedule the procedure." Hollis felt her chest tighten with frustration as she watched Stapleton stride away. The director's dismissal stung, but it was nothing compared to the gnawing certainty that something was terribly wrong about this situation. As she prepared to wheel the gurney back to the kennel area, she noticed Nate Calder, the night custodian, quietly mopping up some spilled water nearby. He caught her eye and gave a subtle nod. "You're right to trust your instincts," he said in a low voice, once Stapleton was out of earshot. "I've been here long enough to know when something doesn't add up." Hollis glanced around to make sure no one else was within hearing distance. "You've noticed it too?" Nate nodded, his weathered face serious. "Been watching that dog since she came in. She's got training, anyone with eyes can see it. The way she moves, how she responds to commands, that's no street dog. But why would anyone want to—" Hollis trailed off, the implications too disturbing to voice. "Question is," Nate said, leaning on his mop handle, "what are you going to do about it?" Hollis looked down at Lace, who gazed back with intelligent eyes. The dog's tail thumped once against the gurney, and the puppy snuggled closer to her. "I can't let them put her down," Hollis said firmly. "Not without knowing the truth." Nate's expression softened. "You'll need to be careful. Stapleton doesn't like people questioning her authority." "I know." Hollis straightened her shoulders. "But I have to try. Something's wrong here, and if no one else is willing to look deeper, then I will." "You've got more backbone than most who've come through here," Nate said with approval. "Just watch your step. And—" he hesitated, then added, "if you need any help, I'm usually around." Hollis felt a surge of gratitude for this quiet ally. "Thanks, Nate. I might take you up on that." As she wheeled Lace back to her kennel, Hollis's mind was already working through possibilities. She would need to check the intake records, compare them with any available documentation. Maybe there were witnesses to Lace's supposed aggressive incidents. There had to be a paper trail, and somewhere in it she might find the truth. The rain continued to drum against the roof as Hollis settled Lace and the puppy back into their kennel. The dog's gentle demeanor, even after all the chaos, only strengthened her resolve. Whatever was going on, whoever had marked this dog for death, Hollis was going to find out why. She could still hear Stapleton's voice in the distance, directing staff to clean up and document the incident. The director's authority rang through the shelter's halls, but for the first time, Hollis felt strong enough to stand against it. Sometimes doing the right thing meant standing alone, except she wasn't completely alone. She realized, thinking of Nate's supportive words. As she locked the kennel door, Hollis made a silent promise to Lace. She would dig deeper, ask questions, and follow whatever trail she found. The official story didn't add up, and she was done accepting things at face value. Something more was going on at this shelter, and she was going to find out what it was, no matter what it cost her. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Hollis sat alone in the shelter's cramped records room, surrounded by stacks of intake files. The clock on the wall showed 11:30 at night, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. Something about Lace's case gnawed at her conscience, refusing to let go. She pulled her coffee closer, the disposable cup long since gone cold, and spread out the paperwork across the metal desk. The intake forms lay before her like pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit together. Her brown hair, usually pulled back neatly, had started falling around her face as the hours wore on. "This can't be right," she muttered, picking up two different forms and holding them side by side. The intake times didn't match. One showed 8:15 in the morning, the other 10:45. A 3-hour difference that made no sense. Hollis grabbed her notepad and started making a list of discrepancies. The witness signatures were another red flag. The first form listed 3 witnesses to Lace's supposed aggressive incident, but the follow-up report only mentioned 1. And that one witness's signature looked different on each document. Her eyes kept coming back to the physical description section. Something about the way Lace's identifying marks were documented felt off. The form noted no distinguishing marks, But Hollis had clearly seen something during the examination, what looked like the remnants of an ear tattoo, partially sanded away. Who would go through the trouble of removing a tattoo? She wondered aloud. The answer made her stomach twist. Someone who wanted to hide this dog's true identity. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her freeze. At this hour, it could only be the night security guard making rounds. Hollis held her breath until the steps faded away. She wasn't technically supposed to be here after hours, but she couldn't shake the feeling that if she didn't act now, it would be too late for Lace. She pulled out her phone and carefully photographed each inconsistent document. The differences were subtle, the kind of things most people would miss during routine processing. But together, they painted a disturbing picture of deliberate manipulation. Around midnight, Dr. Voss's arrival surprised her. The veterinarian's face showed the same concern that had been growing in Hollis's mind since the solvent incident. "I thought I might find you here," Voss said quietly, closing the door behind her. She looked tired but determined, her rimless glasses catching the harsh overhead light. "I've been examining the puppy." Hollis straightened in her chair. "And?" "It's not her puppy." Voss pulled up a spare chair and sat down heavily. "In fact, I don't believe they're related at all. There are no signs of recent lactation in Lace, and the puppy shows none of the typical genetic markers you'd expect to see in a Malinois mix. They're trying to make her look maternal." Hollis realized, the pieces clicking into place. "To cover something else up." "Exactly." Voss leaned forward to examine Hollis's notes. "What have you found?" For the next hour, they pored over the documentation together. Voss's medical expertise added another layer to Hollis's suspicions, pointing out inconsistencies in the behavioral assessments that didn't align with standard protocols. "Look at this," Hollis said, pointing to a series of dates. "The aggressive incident report is dated before the initial intake. How is that even possible?" Voss shook her head. "It's not. Unless the whole thing is fabricated." Hollis finished. The next morning came too quickly. Hollis had barely slept, her mind racing with all they'd discovered. She arrived early to find Stapleton already in her office, phone pressed to her ear. The director's sharp features looked even more severe than usual as she gestured Hollis inside. "We need to talk about yesterday's incident," Stapleton said after hanging up, her tone clipped and professional. "And about your after-hours activities." Hollis stood her ground. "Ma'am, I've found serious problems with Lace's intake documentation. There are contradictions that can't be explained by simple clerical errors." "Miss Pierce," Stapleton interrupted, "you're not qualified to make those assessments. The paperwork has been processed and verified. The euthanasia order stands. But the evidence is circumstantial at best." Stapleton's voice hardened. "This shelter has procedures for a reason. That dog has been deemed dangerous, and we have a responsibility to protect public safety." Dr. Voss chose that moment to knock on the office door, entering with a thick folder of her own. "I'm afraid I have to disagree, Lenore. My medical examination has revealed several inconsistencies that warrant further investigation." Stapleton's expression tightened. "Dr. Voss, surely you're not suggesting—" "I'm suggesting that we have an ethical obligation to verify these documents before proceeding with any irreversible actions." Voss's professional demeanor remained calm but firm. The puppy situation alone raises serious questions. Questions we don't have time or resources to investigate. Stapleton snapped. "The decision has been made. Dr. Voss, you will proceed with the euthanasia as scheduled. Miss Pierce, you are dismissed from this case entirely." Hollis felt her heart pounding. "You can't just ignore this evidence." "Evidence?" Stapleton's laugh was cold. "A few clerical discrepancies and wild theories don't constitute evidence. This is a shelter, not a detective agency. We have protocols to follow. Protocols based on falsified documents." Hollis pressed. "The ear tattoo alone." "Enough!" Stapleton's hand slammed down on her desk. "One more word about this. and you'll be looking for a new job. Is that clear?" The threat hung in the air, but Hollis couldn't back down, not with an innocent life at stake. She turned to Dr. Voss, silently pleading for support. Voss adjusted her glasses, her expression troubled. "Lenore, at least allow me to run a full medical workup, if there's any chance we're making a mistake." "The mistake," Stapleton cut in, "would be letting personal feelings override professional judgment." "You have your orders, Doctor. I expect them to be carried out by the end of the day." Hollis watched helplessly as Stapleton gathered her papers, clearly considering the matter closed. But the evidence they'd uncovered couldn't be ignored. The forged documents, the missing witnesses, the contradicting intake times, it all pointed to something bigger than a simple case of an aggressive dog. Throughout the day, Hollis noticed other staff members watching her with mixed expressions of sympathy and curiosity. Word had spread about her late-night investigation, but few seemed willing to challenge Stapleton's authority openly. During her lunch break, she sat alone in the break room, spreading out copies of her findings. The inconsistencies seemed even more glaring in the harsh daylight. The sanded-away ear tattoo particularly bothered her. It suggested someone had gone to great lengths to hide this dog's true identity. Dr. Voss joined her, closing the break room door for privacy. "I've been making some calls," she said quietly. "There are organizations that specialize in investigating suspicious shelter cases. If we can get them involved—" "We don't have time," Hollis interrupted. "Stapleton wants this done today." "Then we need to find something concrete, something she can't ignore." Voss pulled out her own notes. "The puppy's presence is key. Why go to the trouble of pairing them if they're not related? What's the purpose?" Hollis stared at the intake photos, something nagging at her memory. "Wait." She pulled up the shelter's database on her phone, scrolling through recent cases. 3 weeks ago, we had another Malinois through here. Same story, aggressive behavior, rushed euthanasia order. "You think there's a pattern?" "I think someone's using our shelter to get rid of specific dogs." Hollis's voice dropped even lower. "Dogs that might be recognized. Dogs that might be valuable." The afternoon wore on, tension building with each passing hour. Hollis watched through the window as Stapleton made several agitated phone calls in her office. Whatever was going on, it clearly went beyond normal shelter politics. Dr. Voss's preliminary blood work on Lace came back, revealing another surprise: traces of specialized training supplements in her system. The kind used for working dogs in professional programs. "This is no ordinary stray," Voss confirmed, showing Hollis the results. "These supplements are expensive, highly regulated. They're typically only used in law enforcement or military training programs." The pieces were falling into place, but time was running out. Stapleton had scheduled the euthanasia for 5 o'clock, leaving them less than 2 hours to find proof that couldn't be dismissed. Hollis returned to the records room, this time focusing on intake patterns over the past 6 months. A picture began to emerge, a series of similar cases, all involving working dog breeds, all fast-tracked for euthanasia with paperwork that showed the same types of inconsistencies. Her hands shook as she compiled the evidence. This wasn't just about one dog anymore. This was systematic, a deliberate attempt to use the shelter's euthanasia protocols for something far more sinister. When she finally emerged from the records room, her arms full of documents, she found Dr. Voss waiting with news of her own. The vet's face was pale, but determined. "I did a more detailed scan of where the ear tattoo was removed," she said. "There are traces left, just enough to make out part of a service dog registration number." Hollis felt her heart leap. "That's proof they can't ignore!" But as they hurried towards Stapleton's office, they could see through the window that the director was already putting on her coat, preparing to leave. The clock showed 4:45. Time had almost run out. The evidence was clear, the pattern undeniable. Someone was using the shelter to dispose of trained service dogs, covering their tracks with forged paperwork and rushed euthanasia orders. The question now was whether they could stop it in time to save Lace and expose whatever larger operation was behind it all. The flickering light of the shelter's basement archive room cast long shadows as Hollis and Nate huddled over the ancient computer monitor. The screen's glow illuminated their determined faces as they scrolled through years of digitized records. Outside, rain drummed steadily against the high windows, creating a rhythmic backdrop to their late-night investigation. "There has to be something here," Hollis said, rubbing her tired eyes. She'd been staring at the screen for hours, searching through countless intake photos. "Nate, can you pull up that original intake photo of Lace again?" Nate nodded, his stocky frame leaning forward as his calloused fingers moved across the keyboard. "Give me a second." He navigated through folders until the image appeared, a close-up of Lace's ear taken during her initial processing at the shelter. "Now zoom in on that partial tattoo," Hollis instructed, leaning closer. The image enlarged, becoming slightly pixelated but still clear enough to study. The tattoo was clearly damaged, with parts appearing deliberately scratched away, but some characters remained visible. "Wait," Hollis said suddenly, her heart racing. "Can you enhance the contrast?" Nate adjusted the settings, and suddenly the faded green numbers and letters became more distinct. There, partially obscured but unmistakable, were the letters LACE, followed by what looked like a badge number. "That's not just any tattoo," Hollis breathed. "That's an official K9 unit identification." Her fingers flew across the keyboard, opening a new search window. She typed rapidly. "LACEK 9 Unit Fire Marshal." The search results made her gasp. There it was, a newspaper article from 3 years ago, complete with a photo of a younger, prouder Lace, standing next to a handler in front of a fire truck. The headline read, "Local K9 Unit Helps Crack Arson Case. She's an accelerant detection dog." Hollis whispered, her voice filled with awe. "That's why she reacted so strongly to those solvent fumes. She's trained to detect petroleum products and other accelerants." Nate leaned back in his chair, letting out a low whistle. "That explains a lot. But why would someone try to hide her identity? And why is she here in the shelter marked for euthanasia?" Hollis printed the article and several related documents, her hands shaking slightly as she gathered them. "We need to show this to Dr. Voss right away. This changes everything." They found Dr. Voss in her office, reviewing charts. The veterinarian looked up as they burst in, her rimless glasses reflecting the desk lamp's glow. "This better be important," she said, but her stern expression softened when she saw their excited faces. "Dr. Voss, we found something crucial about Lace," Hollis said, spreading the documents across the desk. She quickly explained their discovery, pointing out the tattoo evidence and the newspaper articles. Dr. Voss listened intently, her professional demeanor giving way to growing concern as she examined the evidence. "This is significant," she said carefully, "but we need to be certain. We should test her abilities to confirm." Within minutes, they had set up a controlled test in the shelter's empty exercise yard. The rain had stopped, leaving the night air cool and damp. Dr. Voss carefully arranged several identical containers on the concrete, only one containing a small amount of petroleum-based cleaner. Hollis led Lace into the yard, her heart pounding with anticipation. The Belgian Malinois moved with purpose, her nose working the air. As soon as she caught the scent, her behavior changed dramatically. Her body tensed, her movements became precise and focused. Without hesitation, she approached the container with the cleaner and sat down beside it, looking up expectantly. "That's a trained response," Dr. Voss said, her voice filled with professional admiration. "No doubt about it. She's indicating the presence of accelerants exactly as a detection dog would." They ran the test 3 more times, rearranging the containers each time. Lace never failed to identify the one containing the petroleum product. "This isn't just about proving she's not dangerous," Hollis said, her voice tight with emotion as she knelt beside Lace, stroking the dog's brindled coat. "She's a witness. A trained professional who can detect accelerants. Someone went to a lot of trouble to hide her identity and get her put down." Dr. Voss nodded slowly, her expression grave. The euthanasia order. It could be part of a cover-up. Someone doesn't want her abilities known or used. But why? Nate asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. Because she might have evidence about something. Hollis replied, her voice hardening with determination. Something someone wants to keep hidden. They spent the next hour documenting everything. Dr. Voss took detailed notes and photos, officially recording Lace's demonstrated abilities. She also performed a thorough examination of the dog, paying special attention to the damaged tattoo area. "Look at this," Dr. Voss said, parting Lace's fur carefully. "The scarring pattern suggests deliberate alteration. Someone used a chemical agent to try to obliterate the tattoo. This wasn't an accident or normal wear and tear." Hollis felt a chill run down her spine, despite the warmth of the examination room. They tried to erase her identity completely, but why not just— She couldn't finish the sentence. Because a dead K-9 officer would raise too many questions. Nate said quietly, "Better to make her look like a dangerous stray, get her put down through official channels. Clean and legal." Dr. Voss straightened up, her decision made. "I'm officially suspending the euthanasia order," she declared, moving to her computer to document the change. "Based on this new evidence, it would be professionally negligent to proceed. We need to contact the proper authorities." Hollis hugged Lace, relief flooding through her. The dog responded with a gentle nuzzle, her warm breath tickling Hollis's ear. For the first time since this all began, Hollis felt hope replacing her fear. "We still need to figure out who's behind this," she said, standing up, "and why they went to such lengths to hide Lace's identity." "One step at a time," Dr. Voss cautioned, though her eyes were kind. "First, we document everything and ensure Lace's safety. Then we can start unraveling this mystery." Nate began gathering their evidence into a folder. "I'll make copies of everything," he offered. "Keep them in different places. Just to be safe." As they worked to secure their discoveries, Hollis couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed in just a few hours. Lace wasn't just a dog in need of saving anymore. She was a trained professional, a hidden witness to something important enough that someone had gone to extreme lengths to silence her. Dr. Voss finished updating Lace's records and turned to face them. "This stays between us for now," she said firmly. "Until we understand what we're dealing with, we need to be careful. Continue Lace's normal care routine, but she stays under special observation. We don't want to alert anyone that we've discovered her true identity." Hollis nodded, understanding the need for caution. She watched as Lace sat alertly beside her, the dog's intelligent eyes scanning the room as if she too understood the gravity of the situation. The damaged tattoo on her ear now seemed less like a scar and more like a badge of survival, evidence of her incredible journey from respected K-9 officer to nearly becoming another statistic in the shelter's records. "She's not just a liability anymore," Hollis said softly, scratching behind Lace's ears. "She's our key to understanding what's really going on here." Dr. Voss checked her watch and sighed. "It's late. We should all get some rest. Tomorrow, we'll start piecing together Lace's history more thoroughly. There must be records of her service, her handler, what happened to bring her here." As they prepared to leave for the night, Hollis felt a new sense of purpose. They had saved Lace from immediate danger, but she knew this was just the beginning. Whatever truth lay behind the dog's presence in the shelter, someone had gone to great lengths to hide it. Now, armed with their discovery of Lace's true identity and abilities, they had a chance to uncover that truth. Nate paused at the door, looking back at Hollis and Lace. "You did good," he said simply, "trusting your instincts about her. Not giving up." Hollis smiled, feeling grateful for his steady support throughout this investigation. "We all did good," she corrected, "and we're not done yet." The fluorescent lights hummed softly in Dr. Voss's office as Hollis spread out the documents she'd gathered across the desk. Her hands trembled slightly as she arranged the papers, each one another piece of the disturbing puzzle she'd uncovered. Outside, the early morning sun was just beginning to peek through the windows, casting long shadows across the room. "I can't believe what I'm seeing," Dr. Voss murmured, adjusting her rimless glasses as she studied the evidence before her. Nate stood quietly by the door, his broad shoulders tense as he kept watch. "It all connects back to one person," Hollis explained, pointing to a name that appeared repeatedly throughout the documents. "Orson Kelleher. He's listed as Lace's last registered owner, but there's more to it than that." She pulled out a stack of newspaper clippings she'd printed from the local archives. "Look at these fires over the past 2 years. All of them were investigated by Kelleher's private investigation firm. All of them resulted in massive insurance payouts to his clients." Dr. Voss picked up one of the articles, her face growing pale as she read. "And you think Lace was involved?" "Not just involved," Hollis said, her voice tight with anger. "I think she was being used. Look at these dates. Every time there was a suspicious fire, Lace was supposedly away for training, according to Kelleher's records. But she's an accelerant detection dog. She would have been able to smell if accelerants were used to start those fires." Nate moved closer to the desk, his worn coveralls rustling as he examined the timeline Hollis had created. "So this Kelleher guy, he's using Lace to help commit insurance fraud. Worse," Hollis said, "he's using her to cover it up. A trained detection dog like Lace would be able to indicate where accelerants were used. But if Kelleher controls when and where she works, he could make sure she never investigates the fires he's involved with." Dr. Voss finished, her professional composure cracking slightly as the implications sank in. Hollis nodded grimly. "And now that Lace is here, showing her abilities with accelerants, she's a threat to his whole operation. That's why the paperwork was forged. That's why there's such pressure to put her down." The room fell silent as the weight of the conspiracy settled over them. Dr. Voss stood up and began pacing, her sensible shoes clicking against the linoleum floor. "This is bigger than just one dog," she said finally. "This is criminal activity on a massive scale." "Which is exactly why we need to protect Lace," Hollis insisted. "She's evidence. Living, breathing evidence of what Kelleher's been doing." Nate cleared his throat. "But how? Director Stapleton's already ordered the euthanasia." Hollis straightened her shoulders, her plain brown hair falling loose from its practical ponytail. "We hide her. Right here in the shelter, where they'd least expect it." "The radiology department?" Dr. Voss said suddenly, her eyes lighting up behind her glasses. "It's perfect. We barely use it since most cases get sent to the emergency vet clinic. The lead-lined walls would make it difficult for anyone to hear her, and nobody goes in there without proper clearance. I can get her there," Nate offered, "through the maintenance corridors. Nobody pays attention to the guy with the mop bucket." Hollis felt a surge of gratitude for her allies. "We'll need more help, though. Someone with legal authority who can take on Kelleher." "I might know someone," Dr. Voss said thoughtfully. "Sarah Chen. She's an assistant district attorney I went to college with. She specializes in fraud cases, and she's always had a soft spot for animals. If we can get her the evidence." "Then we need to move fast," Hollis said, gathering up the documents. "Stapleton will be checking on things first thing this morning." They quickly formulated their plan. Nate would create a diversion in the main kennel area, giving Hollis time to move Lace, while Dr. Voss contacted the DA. The risk was enormous. They could all lose their jobs, or worse, but the alternative was unthinkable. As they prepared to put their plan into action, Hollis felt a mix of fear and determination. She thought about Lace, about the tired resignation in the dog's eyes when she'd first arrived at the shelter. No more running, no more being used as a tool for corruption. They would protect her, no matter the cost. Moving through the shelter's quiet morning corridors, Hollis's heart pounded with each step. The familiar sounds of the awakening shelter, the distant barking of dogs, the hum of the heating system, The squeak of her rubber-soled shoes on the floor seemed amplified by her heightened awareness. She reached Lace's kennel just as Nate's voice boomed from the main area, announcing a burst pipe that required immediate attention. The resulting commotion provided perfect cover as Hollis quickly attached a leash to Lace's collar. "Come on, girl," she whispered, leading the Belgian Malinois through the back corridors. Lace moved silently beside her, as if sensing the need for stealth. The dog's brindled coat seemed to blend with the shadows, making her nearly invisible in the dim light. The radiology department was located in the shelter's oldest wing, a maze of narrow hallways that few staff members ever visited. Dr. Voss had already prepared the space, setting up a comfortable bed and water bowl in the corner furthest from the door. The lead-lined walls that had once protected staff from radiation would now protect Lace from discovery. As Hollis settled Lace into her temporary sanctuary, she heard Dr. Voss's voice from the doorway. "Sarah's on her way," she said quietly. "She wants to see all the evidence we've gathered, and she's bringing a fire marshal with her." Hollis knelt beside Lace, running her hand over the dog's scarred ear where the tattoo had been partially destroyed. "We're not going to let anything happen to you," she promised. "You're safe now." The sound of approaching footsteps sent them all into high alert, but it was only Nate, slightly out of breath from his rushed journey through the maintenance corridors. "Stapleton's here early," he reported. "She's asking for both of you." Dr. Voss straightened her lab coat, her professional mask sliding back into place. "Then we'll go face her. The longer we can keep her distracted, the more time we buy for Sarah to get here." As they prepared to leave, Hollis took one last look at Lace. The dog sat alert in her new hiding place, her intelligent eyes following their movements. Despite everything she'd been through, there was still strength in her posture, still dignity in the way she held herself. "This is the right thing," Nate said softly, placing a reassuring hand on Hollis's shoulder. "Sometimes you have to break the rules to do what's right." They locked the radiology department securely behind them, each carrying a key that represented their commitment to protecting Lace. As they walked toward the administrative offices, Hollis felt a strange calm settle over her. They were no longer just shelter workers doing their jobs. They were guardians of the truth, protectors of an innocent life that could expose a web of corruption. Director Stapleton was waiting in her office, her face set in lines of irritation. But now, knowing what they knew, her attempts at intimidation seemed almost pathetic. They had chosen their path, chosen to stand against the corruption that had nearly claimed Lace's life. Whatever consequences came, they would face them together. The morning light streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Somewhere in the shelter's quiet radiology department, a brave dog waited for justice. And in the hearts of those who had chosen to protect her, a fierce determination burned. They had taken their stand, drawn their line in the sand. Now they just had to hold on until help arrived. Dr. Voss's phone buzzed quietly in her pocket, a text from Sarah Chen confirming she was on her way with a team. Hollis caught the slight nod from the veterinarian and felt her resolve strengthen. They had done what needed to be done. Now they just had to keep their composure and protect their secret until reinforcements arrived. The conspiracy that Orson Kelleher had built around Lace was about to unravel, one thread at a time. And it had started here, in this modest animal shelter, with a group of people who refused to look the other way. Sometimes the biggest changes start in the smallest places, with people who simply decide to do what's right, no matter the cost. As they entered Director Stapleton's office, Hollis straightened her shoulders. Whatever came next, they were ready. They had chosen their side, not just for Lace, but for every victim of Kelleher's schemes. The truth would come out, one way or another. And when it did, justice would finally be served. For now, they had their parts to play. Keep Stapleton distracted, protect their secret, and wait for help to arrive. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply stand your ground and refuse to back down. That's exactly what they intended to do. The morning calm at the shelter shattered as the front doors burst open. Orson Kelleher stormed in, his expensive suit slightly rumpled and his face flushed with anger. Behind him, Director Stapleton hurried to keep pace, her heels clicking rapidly against the linoleum floor. In Kelleher's hand, a stack of official-looking papers waved like a weapon. Hollis stood frozen at the front desk, her heart hammering in her chest. She'd been in the middle of morning feeds when the commotion started, and now she watched as Kelleher's imposing figure advanced toward her. "Where is she?" he demanded, slapping the papers down on the counter. "I have a court order here authorizing the immediate release of my property." Hollis glanced at the documents, her throat tight. The legal language swam before her eyes, but certain phrases jumped out. Immediate surrender, and rightful owner, and court-mandated compliance. "Mr. Kelleher has provided proof of ownership," Stapleton announced, her voice carrying an edge of triumph. "The dog is to be released to him immediately." "These papers are irregular," Hollis said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "We need time to verify." "Verify?" Kelleher laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're a kennel worker, Miss Pierce. You're not qualified to verify anything." Just then, a commotion erupted from the back of the shelter. The small, mixed-breed dog that had been found with Lace had somehow slipped its lead during the morning walks. It darted through the reception area, frightened by the raised voices and tension in the air. "Catch that mutt!" Stapleton shouted as the dog headed straight for the automatically opening front doors. Hollis's heart stopped as she saw what was coming. A delivery van was pulling into the shelter's driveway, its driver distracted by something on the passenger seat. The small dog was running straight into its path. Without hesitation, Hollis vaulted over the front desk. Her feet hit the ground running, and she burst through the doors after the dog. The van's engine roared closer, its driver still unaware of the impending disaster. "No!" Hollis screamed, pushing herself faster. The small dog froze in the middle of the driveway, paralyzed by the approaching vehicle. In 3 desperate strides, Hollis reached it, scooping the trembling animal into her arms and throwing herself toward the grass. She hit the ground hard, rolling to protect the dog clutched against her chest. The van's brakes squealed as the driver finally noticed them, the vehicle stopping mere feet from where they lay. Pain shot through Hollis's shoulder where she'd landed, but she didn't let go of the dog. Its small heart raced against her palm as she carefully sat up, checking it for injuries. Kelleher's shadow fell across them. "Very heroic," he sneered, looking down at Hollis. "But ultimately pointless, just like your attempts to interfere with my property." Hollis lifted her chin, still cradling the shaking dog. "Lace isn't property," she said firmly. "She's a witness to your crimes." "Crimes?" Kelleher's face darkened. "You've been watching too many movies, Miss Pierce. Lace is nothing more than a retired working dog that I legally acquired. And thanks to these court orders, she'll be back in my custody within the hour. She's an accelerant detection dog." Hollis pressed, struggling to her feet. Her shoulder throbbed, but she stood straight. "And her training is still active? Why would a private investigator need a dog specifically trained to detect evidence of arson?" "That's quite enough," Stapleton cut in, her face tight with barely controlled anger. "Miss Pierce, you're suspending pending an investigation into your conduct. Hand over your keys and leave the premises immediately." "You can't silence the truth," Hollis said, looking between them. Lace's abilities, her reactions to the solvent fumes, it all points to something bigger, something criminal. Kelleher stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You're playing with fire, little girl. Walk away now, while you still can." But as Hollis looked down at the small dog in her arms, still trembling from its near-death experience, something solidified in her heart. This was what it meant to stand up for those who couldn't protect themselves. This was what it meant to fight for justice, no matter the cost. "No," she said simply, "I won't walk away. Not when lives are at stake." "Lives." Kelleher laughed again, but there was a dangerous edge to it now. "It's just a dog. A tool that's outlived its usefulness. Your misplaced sentimentality is going to cost you everything." "You're wrong," Hollis replied, her voice growing stronger. This isn't about sentiment. It's about right and wrong. It's about justice. And Lace deserves justice for whatever you've made her part of. The delivery van driver approached cautiously, concern written on his face. Is everyone okay? I didn't see you until. Everything's fine. Stapleton cut him off sharply. Please proceed with your delivery. Hollis watched as Kelleher's face shifted, calculation replacing anger. You have 1 hour to produce my dog, he said coldly. After that, I'll return with law enforcement. And believe me, you won't like the consequences. But Hollis stood her ground, the small dog still secure in her arms. She knew now, with absolute certainty, what she was fighting for. This wasn't just about one dog or one case of corruption. It was about standing up to power, about protecting the vulnerable, about refusing to let evil triumph through good people's inaction. 1 hour, Kelleher repeated, turning on his heel. Tick-tock, Miss Pierce. As he strode away, Stapleton following in his wake, Hollis remained where she was, her heart rate finally beginning to slow. The small dog in her arms had stopped shaking, and now looked up at her with trust in its eyes. Dr. Voss appeared in the doorway, her face pale with concern. Are you all right? I saw what happened. I'm fine, Hollis assured her, though her shoulder still ached. But we need to move fast. Sarah Chen needs to get here before that hour is up, or we're going to lose everything we've worked for. Hollis's hands trembled as she flipped through the intake logs, her eyes growing wider with each inconsistency she discovered. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the quiet records room as she spread the papers across the metal desk. Something about the puppy's paperwork had been nagging at her mind all week, and now she finally understood why. This can't be right, she muttered, comparing 2 different forms. The first showed the puppy arriving 3 days before Lace, while another log listed them coming in together. Even more suspicious, the handwriting changed halfway through several documents, as if someone had gone back to modify the details. Dr. Voss appeared in the doorway, her normally composed features tight with concern. Hollis, I need to show you something. She held up a manila folder stamped with red letters reading, Medical Examination Results. What did you find? Hollis asked, pushing back from the desk. I've completed a thorough exam of both dogs, Dr. Voss said, closing the door behind her. The puppy shows no genetic markers matching Lace's breed profile. More importantly, Lace shows no signs of recent pregnancy or lactation. It's physically impossible for her to be this puppy's mother. Hollis felt her stomach drop. They staged it. They brought in a random puppy to make Lace look maternal, to sell the story that she was an unstable mother who needed to be put down. Exactly. Dr. Voss's voice was grim. This whole situation was engineered to create a plausible reason for euthanasia without raising suspicions. Someone went to a lot of trouble to make this look legitimate. Just then, they heard voices approaching in the hallway. Hollis quickly grabbed her phone from her pocket and hit record, sliding it partially under some papers as Director Stapleton burst into the room with her usual imperious energy. Dr. Voss, where are we on processing that euthanasia paperwork? Stapleton demanded, not even acknowledging Hollis's presence. Director, I have serious concerns about the documentation. Dr. Voss began carefully. The medical evidence doesn't support— I don't care about your concerns. Stapleton cut her off sharply. Mr. Kelleher has provided all the necessary authorizations. Your job is to sign off on the medical forms and carry out the procedure. But the records have clearly been altered, Dr. Voss protested. The puppy isn't even— Listen carefully. Stapleton's voice dropped to a menacing whisper. You will falsify whatever needs to be falsified to make this go away quietly, unless you want the board to hear about those medication inventory discrepancies from last quarter. Hollis felt sick as she watched Dr. Voss's face drain of color. The vet's hands clenched into fists at her sides, but she remained silent under the threat. I'll expect those papers on my desk by end of day, Stapleton said with finality, turning on her heel and stalking out. As soon as the director was gone, Hollis retrieved her phone, stopping the recording with trembling fingers. "We have her now," she said quietly. "This isn't just sloppy paperwork anymore. It's deliberate fraud to cover up whatever Kelleher is trying to hide." Dr. Voss sank into a chair, removing her glasses to rub her tired eyes. "They're going to destroy that dog to protect themselves, and they'll destroy anyone who gets in their way. Not if we can help it," Hollis said firmly. She began gathering up the damning documents, carefully noting each discrepancy. "We need to get copies of everything. Intake forms, medical records, your exam results. And we need to move Lace somewhere safer. They could try to access the kennel area at any time." "The radiology room," Dr. Voss suggested after a moment's thought. "It stays locked when not in use, and only senior medical staff have keys. I can say I'm running additional tests." Hollis nodded. "Perfect. And I think it's time we brought in some outside help. Do you still have that contact at the district attorney's office?" "Monica Chang," Dr. Voss confirmed. "She's handled animal abuse cases before. I'll call her right now." As Dr. Voss made the call, Hollis continued examining the forged documents with growing anger. Dates altered, signatures that didn't match, convenient omissions. It was amateur work, done hastily by someone who never expected anyone to look too closely. They had counted on everyone just following orders without question. The puppy wasn't even the same color as Lace, now that Hollis really looked at the intake photos. How had they thought they would get away with this? But then again, they nearly had. If Lace hadn't displayed her accelerant detection skills during that near disaster in the exam room, they might never have discovered the truth. "Monica can meet us first thing tomorrow morning," Dr. Voss reported, ending her call. "She wants us to secure all the evidence and keep both dogs safe until then. She's especially interested in that recording you just made. Then let's move them now, while the day staff is still here as cover." Hollis suggested, "I'll get a travel kennel and meet you at their current holding area in 10 minutes. As they separated to put their plan in motion, Hollis felt the weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders. They weren't just fighting to save one dog anymore. They were taking on an entire conspiracy of powerful people who had no qualms about destroying evidence or threatening careers. But the alternative was unthinkable, allowing an innocent animal to be killed just to protect criminals. The next hour was a blur of careful preparation as they moved Lace and the puppy to their new hiding spot. Dr. Voss created a fake set of radiographs to explain their presence in the imaging room, while Hollis made sure they had enough supplies to last until morning. Through it all, Lace remained calm and alert, as if she understood they were trying to help her. The puppy, separated from her now, showed no signs of distress. Further proof that their supposed bond had been entirely staged. "I'll stay late tonight to keep an eye on things," Hollis offered as they finished securing the room. "I don't trust Stapleton not to try something after hours." Dr. Voss squeezed her shoulder gratefully. "You're risking a lot, you know. Your job, your reputation. Some things are worth the risk." Hollis replied simply, "We can't let them get away with this." As twilight settled over the shelter and the day shift headed home, Hollis settled in for a long night of vigilance. She had positioned herself where she could monitor both the radiology room door and the main entrance, armed with her phone to record any suspicious activity. The evidence they'd gathered was safely backed up to multiple secure locations. Tomorrow, they would take their case to the DA's office. But tonight, their priority was keeping Lace alive to tell her story. Somewhere out there, Kelleher was probably already planning his next move. But he hadn't counted on facing opponents who cared more about justice than their own safety. The truth about the staged maternal bond had changed everything. This wasn't just about saving one dog anymore. It was about exposing a web of corruption that had allowed criminals to manipulate the shelter system for their own ends. Hollis didn't know exactly what Kelleher was hiding, but she knew it had to be serious for him to go to such lengths to silence a potential witness. As she maintained her watch through the quiet evening hours, Hollis reviewed everything they'd learned. The sanded-off tattoo that had identified Lace as a trained accelerant detection dog, the falsified intake records creating a fictional story about an aggressive mother dog, the threat against Dr. Voss to force her cooperation. Each piece added up to a deliberate conspiracy to eliminate evidence. Evidence that could apparently bring down whatever criminal enterprise Kelleher was running. The soft whine of the puppy occasionally drifted through the door, but Lace remained silent, as if understanding the need for stealth. Hollis checked her phone again, making sure the damning recording was safely backed up to the cloud. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough, but first they had to make it through the night. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot as Hollis, Nate, and Dr. Voss gathered behind the shelter. Lace sat alertly at Hollis's feet, her brindled coat gleaming in the dawn light. The retired K-9's ears perked forward, already sensing the importance of the mission ahead. "Are we sure about this?" Dr. Voss asked, nervously adjusting her glasses. "If we're wrong." "We're not wrong," Hollis said firmly, kneeling to scratch behind Lace's scarred ear. "Those storage units Kelleher insured last month. The timing matches perfectly with 3 separate fires. We just need proof." Nate nodded, checking his phone. "My contact at the fire marshal's office is standing by. The moment Lace indicates anything suspicious, they'll move in with a warrant." They had planned this carefully over the past 2 days, a controlled scent lineup using Lace's training to expose Kelleher's hidden evidence. The storage facility was only 10 minutes away, and Hollis's heart pounded with equal parts anxiety and determination as they loaded into Nate's SUV. "Remember," Hollis said as they drove, "we need to document everything perfectly." No mistakes. She held up her phone, making sure it was fully charged to record Lace's every move. The storage facility sprawled across several acres, rows of identical orange doors stretching into the distance. They parked near unit number 312, the one listed on Kelleher's most recent insurance filing. The facility manager, a thin man named Pete, who had agreed to help after hearing their concerns, met them with a ring of keys jangling at his belt. "These 5 units here," Pete said, gesturing to a row of doors. "They're all empty except for Kelleher's. Perfect for your lineup test." Hollis nodded gratefully. "Thank you for helping us." "Lace, come." The dog padded obediently to her side, already alert and focused. They started with the empty units first, establishing a baseline. Hollis guided Lace past each door, the dog's nose working methodically along the seams. No alerts, perfect control conditions. When they reached Kelleher's unit, the change in Lace's behavior was immediate and dramatic. Her tail stiffened, and she sat abruptly, the trained indication for detecting accelerants. Hollis's heart leaped. "There," she said, keeping her voice steady despite her excitement. "Mark that response, Nate." They continued down the row, and Lace alerted 2 more times at specific spots along the unit's walls. Dr. Voss carefully documented each location while Nate called their contact. Within 20 minutes, 2 unmarked police cars and a fire marshal's vehicle pulled into the lot. Hollis felt a surge of validation as she watched the investigators don protective gear and open the unit. Inside, they found exactly what Lace had indicated: carefully hidden containers of accelerants, along with timing devices and other materials consistent with arson. "This is it," the lead investigator said, carefully bagging evidence. "Outstanding work with your K-9. This matches the chemical signatures we found at 3 separate scenes." Hollis could hardly contain her relief. Finally, proof that couldn't be ignored or explained away. She knelt to hug Lace, whispering praise into the dog's scarred ear. "You did it, girl. You really did it." The triumph lasted exactly 47 minutes. They were just finishing up at the storage facility when Hollis's phone buzzed with an urgent text from another shelter worker. Her stomach dropped as she read the message. Stapleton had called an emergency staff meeting. When they rushed back to the shelter, they found the atmosphere charged with tension. Stapleton stood at the front of the break room, her face a mask of righteous anger as she held up a stack of papers. "These intake records," Stapleton announced to the assembled staff, show clear evidence of tampering. Dates changed, signatures forged, all by someone trying to build a false case against a respected member of our community. Hollis felt the blood drain from her face as Stapleton continued. Security footage shows Miss Pierce accessing these files late at night, well outside her authorized hours. She has manipulated evidence to support her conspiracy theories about Mr. Kelleher, putting this shelter's reputation at risk. The room erupted in whispers. Hollis stood frozen, watching as the victory she'd felt moments ago crumbled around her. She tried to speak up, to explain about the evidence they'd just uncovered, but Stapleton smoothly talked over her. Furthermore, Stapleton continued, her voice dripping with false concern, she has been observed using shelter resources without authorization, including taking animals off-site without proper documentation. This is a serious breach of protocol. Dr. Voss stepped forward. Now wait just a minute. But Stapleton was prepared for that too. Dr. Voss, your involvement in this situation will be addressed separately. For now, Miss Pierce is suspended pending a full investigation of her activities. The betrayal stung like a physical blow. Hollis watched helplessly as her colleagues, people she'd worked alongside for years, avoided her eyes. Even with the evidence they'd just uncovered, Stapleton had managed to poison the well, casting doubt on everything Hollis had worked to prove. Nate tried to interrupt with news of the storage unit discovery, but Stapleton smoothly deflected. Any evidence collected under such suspicious circumstances will naturally require extensive verification. We cannot trust the word of someone who has already demonstrated a willingness to falsify records. Hollis felt Lace press against her leg, offering silent support as her world tilted sideways. The dog's presence was the only thing that kept her standing, as Stapleton continued to systematically dismantle her credibility. Please surrender your badge and keys, Stapleton said, holding out her hand. Security will escort you from the premises. The walk to her locker felt endless. Hollis was acutely aware of the stares following her, the whispers just barely audible. She'd done everything right, followed every protocol, gathered concrete evidence, and with a few carefully crafted accusations, Stapleton had turned it all against her. As she gathered her belongings, Hollis caught a glimpse of Kelleher through the lobby windows, stepping out of his expensive car. The smirk on his face told her he'd known this was coming. Somehow they'd anticipated her moves and prepared this counter-strike. But as she looked down at Lace, still faithfully at her side, Hollis felt a spark of determination through the despair. They had real evidence now, evidence that couldn't be explained away with false accusations about paperwork. Stapleton might have won this round, but the truth was still out there, documented and in police custody. Come on, girl, she whispered to Lace as they walked out the front doors. We're not done fighting yet. The security guard who followed them to the parking lot at least had the decency to look embarrassed about it. As Hollis loaded her box of belongings into her car, she caught sight of Dr. Voss watching from an upstairs window, her face tight with worry and anger. The drive home was a blur, with Lace's steady presence in the passenger seat the only thing keeping Hollis grounded. Her phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from Nate and Dr. Voss, but she couldn't bring herself to read them yet. The contrast between the triumph at the storage facility and the devastating scene at the shelter was still too raw. She pulled into her apartment complex just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows that matched her mood. But as she looked at Lace, remembering how the dog had performed flawlessly during their investigation, she felt her resolve strengthen. Stapleton might have undermined her credibility at the shelter, but she couldn't change the physical evidence they'd uncovered. Somewhere in that storage unit was the proof they needed. Proof that would speak louder than any accusations about tampered paperwork. The smoke billowed thick and black through the boathouse as Kelleher backed toward the far wall, his expensive suit now stained with soot. His carefully maintained control was crumbling, replaced by something wild and desperate in his eyes. The puppy whimpered from the corner where he huddled, terrified by the growing flames that licked up the wooden walls. Hollis crouched low, her heart pounding as she inched forward. The acrid smell of accelerant burned her nose. Through the haze, she could see Nate and Dr. Voss at the entrance, Lace's powerful form held steady between them. The Belgian Malinois' training kicked in instantly. Her nose lifted, testing the air, detecting the dangerous cocktail of chemicals Kelleher had spread. "It's over," Hollis called out, her voice steady despite her fear. The building's surrounded. Fire marshals outside. They know everything. Kelleher's laugh was harsh. "You think you've won? I've built this operation for 20 years. You're nothing, a shelter worker who couldn't even get into vet school." But his words held less power now. Hollis saw the truth. He was cornered, and he knew it. Behind her, Lace gave a low growl, recognizing her former captor. "Lace knows every fire you set," Hollis pressed. "Every accelerant you used. She's living proof of your whole operation. That's why you wanted her dead, but you failed." The flames were spreading faster now, feeding on the fuel-soaked walls. Smoke curled around them in thick ropes. The puppy's cries grew more frantic. "Hollis!" Nate's voice carried urgent warning. "The structure's not stable." She had to act fast. In one fluid motion, Hollis lunged forward, scooping up the terrified puppy. But Kelleher wasn't finished. He pulled something from his pocket, a lighter gleaming in the orange glow. "Stay back," he snarled. "One more step and I'll—" But he never finished the threat. Lace burst forward with years of training behind her powerful stride. Her teeth found Kelleher's wrist with surgical precision. The lighter clattered to the ground as he howled in pain and surprise. The fire was reaching critical mass now, the heat intense enough to make breathing difficult. Wooden beams groaned ominously overhead. Hollis clutched the puppy to her chest and scrambled backward as Nate rushed forward to help restrain Kelleher. "Move! Everyone out now!" Dr. Voss shouted from the doorway. They half-dragged, half-pushed Kelleher through the smoke. The moment they cleared the building, emergency responders swarmed in. Fire crews attacked the blaze while police officers took control of Kelleher, who had lost all his smooth arrogance. He looked small now, coughing and handcuffed. Through the chaos, Hollis saw a familiar face, Director Stapleton being led to a police cruiser in handcuffs of her own. The woman's sharp features were twisted in disbelief as an officer read her rights. Nearby, several officials were examining documents, the evidence of her complicity laid bare. "You okay?" Nate appeared at her side, his face streaked with soot. His hand found hers, warm and steady. Hollis nodded, still holding the trembling puppy. Lace pressed against her leg, alert but calm now that the danger had passed. "We did it," she whispered. "We really did it." The next few hours passed in a blur of statements and medical checks. The fire was contained, the building a charred skeleton against the dawning sky. Hollis learned that while they'd been confronting Kelleher, the DA's office had executed search warrants at multiple locations. The evidence was overwhelming. Years of falsified reports, insurance fraud, and orchestrated arsons all exposed. 2 weeks later, Hollis stood in the shelter's front office, watching as Dr. Voss signed the final adoption papers. The puppy, now officially named Skipper, wagged his tail from his spot next to Lace. Both dogs wore new collars, symbols of their fresh start. "Congratulations," Dr. Voss said warmly, sliding the paperwork across the desk. "They're officially yours. Though I think they chose you long before these papers made it legal." Hollis smiled, running her fingers over the official documents. So much had changed in such a short time. Kelleher was facing multiple felony charges, his network of corruption exposed. Stapleton's indictment had sent shockwaves through the local government, leading to widespread reforms in shelter management. But the biggest changes were more personal. The fire marshal's office had approached Hollis with an unexpected offer. They wanted both her and Lace. The experienced K9 would help train new handlers, while Hollis would begin her own journey toward becoming a certified handler herself. "I never thought I'd end up here," she admitted to Nate that evening as they walked through the park. Skipper romped ahead with boundless energy while Lace moved with dignified purpose beside them. "Working with animals, yes, but this? It feels like a dream." Nate's fingers intertwined with hers, a gesture that had become wonderfully familiar. "You always had it in you," he said. "You just needed the right moment to prove it to everyone else." They stopped at a bench overlooking the pond, the setting sun painting the water in shades of gold and pink. Skipper flopped at their feet, finally tired from his play, while Lace sat alertly scanning their surroundings, always the professional. "The training starts next week," Hollis said. "I'm nervous but excited." Lace seems ready to work again. She lights up every time we practice basic scent detection. "You'll be amazing." Nate's voice held absolute conviction. "Both of you will." Their relationship had deepened through the crucible of danger and shared purpose. What started as friendship had bloomed into something more: trust, understanding, and a connection that grew stronger each day. There was no rush, no pressure, just the quiet certainty that they were walking the same path. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Hollis woke early, padding through her small house, now home to herself and 2 dogs. Skipper's puppy bed lay empty. He preferred to sleep curled against Lace, and the morning sun streamed through windows that badly needed washing. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. She started the coffee maker and opened the back door to let the dogs out. Lace moved with renewed confidence these days, her training reawakening under positive guidance. Skipper bounded after her, no longer the frightened pup from the shelter, but a happy, well-adjusted dog secure in his place. Hollis leaned against the doorframe, breathing in the fresh morning air. Her new uniform hung pressed and ready in the closet. She'd start as a trainee handler next week, working alongside experienced K9 teams. The path ahead would be challenging, but she was ready. Her phone buzzed with a good morning text from Nate, making her smile. He'd be over later to help install new security features, something they'd agreed was important given their history with Kelleher. But for now, this moment was enough. The peaceful morning, her dogs playing in the dewy grass, and the knowledge that she'd followed her convictions and found her true calling. Lace trotted back to her side, pressing against her leg in a familiar gesture of connection. Hollis knelt down, scratching behind the dog's ears where her old tattoo was still visible, no longer a mark of ownership but a badge of survival. "Ready for a new chapter, girl?" she asked softly. Lace's tail wagged once, decisive. They'd been through fire together, literally and figuratively, and emerged stronger. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a team. Handler and K9, protector and protected, bound by trust and determination. Skipper rushed over to join them, not wanting to be left out of the moment. Hollis laughed as he showered her face with puppy kisses. This was her family now. Unconventional, perhaps, but built on the strongest foundations of loyalty and love. The morning stretched ahead, full of promise. There were training manuals to study, equipment to organize, and a new life to embrace. But for now, Hollis simply savored the quiet victory of the moment. Justice had been served, truth had prevailed, and her path had become clear through the very challenge that was meant to break her. Inside, the coffee maker beeped its readiness. Birds sang in the maple tree overhanging her small yard, and in her heart, Hollis felt a deep sense of peace. She had found her purpose, her family, and her future, all because she'd refused to look away when something felt wrong. Lace nudged her hand, ever the professional, reminding her it was time to start their morning routine. They had training to do, skills to sharpen, and a world of possibility ahead. Hollis straightened up, squared her shoulders, and smiled. This was just the beginning. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.